Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? My name's Morgan Colby, by the way. No Rick Lemon, like I said on the last show. Today we're going to talk about the top 12 running backs, and this might be my favorite show that we do in July, in August, throughout the entire offseason, because I love running backs. Running backs are my thing. I have a fetish with running backs. Love running backs. So I'm going to talk about my top 12 today, give you my reasoning, my takes, my thoughts, my opinions on some of these rankings. I might even go add in the ECR just to kind of mix that in and tell you, who they might have in the top 12. Leonard Fournette's currently ranked in the top 12. And I'm like, have you seen some of the workout videos for him? Because he's looking pretty hefty. He's looking like a big boy. Looks like he needs to lose 20 pounds before the season starts. But I'm going to talk about my top 12 running backs today. Before we do that, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platforms, please leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below if you have any questions for me or Rick, because Rick can comment. He just can't be here. Hopefully you're enjoying your vacation, Rick, if you're watching. Let's talk about our top 12 running backs for the 2022 fantasy football season. Top 12 running backs. So excited about this show. Sad I'm doing it by myself, to be honest with you, because this is like one of my favorite shows to do on the air. Maybe we'll do another one. I don't know. I talked to Rick possibly doing a top 50 show where we rank our top 50 players quickly, expeditiously. I don't know if we can do that. Not sure. But anyway, let's talk about the top 12 running backs I have for this season. Number one, Jonathan Taylor. Pretty self-explanatory. Pretty easy one to decipher. Love it. Once again, I hate it. I don't hate the player. I hate the game sometimes because Jonathan Taylor finishes in half PPR leagues. Jonathan Taylor finishes the number one running back in fantasy football last year. And I'm doing this thing again for the second time this year, let alone ever, where I have Jonathan Taylor as my number one running back. But Jonathan Taylor did some things last year that are amazing. And he's still, I looked at his numbers from last year, and I still think that he has more to provide the Indianapolis Colts. But it's clear that he has a ton of opportunity in that offense, and that's not going to change with Matt Ryan coming in. But I think the Colts are going to be more efficient, right? I mean, this guy had 20 touchdowns last year and 1,800 rushing yards, and they added Matt Ryan, who I think is a better quarterback at this point in his career than Carson Wentz is. And so with a more efficient offensive attack for the Indianapolis Colts, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the ceiling is still not reached or met by Jonathan Taylor. Last year, he had 68.6 snap percentage, number 5 in the league. I still don't think that's as high as it could go. He had 330 rushing attempts and 40 catches, so 362 opportunities. When the Colts lost, it's because they weren't giving the ball to Jonathan Taylor. And when the Colts won, it was because they were giving the ball to Jonathan Taylor. There's no way that Frank Reich and the Indianapolis Colts looked at this offense and said, Jonathan Taylor is not going to get the ball. We got to split this. No, you got to give the ball to Jonathan Taylor. Simple as that. Higher snap percentage, higher opportunity share, higher everything. And I think he was number 2 in weighted opportunities last year. I think that goes up. He was insanely efficient in every category. There's really nothing else to say for this guy. He wasn't game script dependent at all. He was somebody they used in passing games, somebody that they used when they wanted to just run the ball. And right now he is currently 1.2 on ADP's underdog, so underdog's ADP, I should say. And unless you're the number one pick, you're not going to get this guy. So I think you're safe picking him as the number one running back off the board. If I am able to, I got number 2 pick in our home league, and I need this player on my team. I'm hoping that the guy that is number 1 completely just pansies out and takes Christian McCaffrey because I need Jonathan Taylor. Hopefully he's not listening to this podcast. But anyway, so Jonathan Taylor being 1, pretty self-explanatory. I don't really, for the last QB1, when I was talking about Josh Allen, repeating this year over last year being the QB1 last year and the year before, and now me ranking him 1 and not liking that. I had some cons with him. I don't have any cons with Jonathan Taylor. If he stays healthy and he gets the opportunity share that he got, he's a top 2 running back, probably RB1. We talked about this player coming out being an elite generational talent, and he has been that for the Indianapolis Colts. Only good things. So he is number 1 on my list. Number 2, I have Christian McCaffrey. And so right now, pretty on cue with consensus. The consensus right now, Jonathan Taylor 1, Christian McCaffrey 2. We start disagreeing in a second, which I'll get to. But Christian McCaffrey, there are massive concerns for me, and this is why he's not number 1. Because when he is number 1, when he is on the field and healthy and good, Christian McCaffrey is number 1. He was number 2 in 2018, number 1 in 2019. Last year, on a points per game basis, in the 3 games that he played, he averaged 30 points a game, which would have, averaged RB1 numbers. He had 6 touchdowns in 3 games, 59 rush attempts in 3 games, 17 catches in 3 games. If he's healthy, he catches 100 balls. He rushes for 1,300 yards. He gets maybe 1,000 receiving yards. Like, this guy is a number 1, number 2 running back in fantasy football when he's on the field. And that's the key cog. 2017 rookie year, 16 games played out of 16. 2018, 16 games out of 16 played. 2019, 16 games out of 16 games played. 2020, 3 games played. 2021, 7 games played. In 2020, that was the 30 points per game. He had 18 points per game in 7 games played this year. But if you, on Player Profiler, they got this great injury history animation graphic. I don't even know what you want to call it. If you scroll all the way at the bottom of the page, it tells you his injury history. And so he, over the last couple years, has suffered a lot of injuries. Prior to this, 2017, he had a shoulder strain, came back from that quickly. Didn't miss any games. It was just like a minor injury. Back strain, didn't miss any games. He had a knee strain in 2019 and a foot strain in 2019. These are just like injuries where, you had to keep an eye on it, but it wasn't that bad, and he was totally fine. The major injuries started occurring in week 2 of 2020. He had a high ankle sprain where he missed 6 games, and then he got an AC joint sprain where he missed 3 more games in that 2020 season. And then he followed that up with a thigh injury that had to miss 4 more games. So he missed a total of 13 games that season. And then last year he had 5 games with a hamstring strain, 5 games with an ankle sprain. He's just been injured the last 2 years. And so part of me wants to believe that, he's not going to get injured and that he has the upside and the ability to play a full 17-game season. But there are some concerns with injury. And I'm not sure he's going to be able to live up to what he is capable of doing, just on the pure fact that his injury history has been there. And these injuries are not something to be, looked at and view as something minor. He's had serious injuries that affect running backs' careers. They weren't season-ending, but they linger, they last, and they slow guys down. In the NBA, Klay Thompson had 2 straight major injuries, ACL, I believe, and tore his Achilles, I believe. Back-to-back, didn't play for a long while, came back this year, played good, but he's not the same player. And I think, when do we start answering the question of like, okay, is Christian McCaffrey going to be the same player when he comes back? Not only just that, but you have some major issues now with the Carolina Panthers coming out and saying that there's a possibility that they could limit Christian McCaffrey in games and start giving more work to, the second or third running back to keep him off the field so they can keep him fresh and healthy and he doesn't get hurt as often, which sucks, especially if you're drafting him as the second running back off the board. So I like him as number 2, but this is the last year I'm rolling this train. If he gets hurt again, I'm out. See you later. Number 3 is Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook disappointed last year. He did have an injury. He was a guy that had early in his career a ton of injuries, couldn't get on the field, but over the last couple years has had success. Breakout season in 2019. He was number 2. 2020, he was number 2 again. Last year, in 13 games played and a fantasy point per game total was number 9 overall. He finished as RB16 because he missed 3 more games than he should have. But had he played 4 extra games, he probably would have finished with the QB9 total. Dalvin Cook, number 3, I like his opportunity. He gets 50 receptions a season, with 300 to 500 rushing yards. His big problem is that in the past 2 seasons where he's finished as running back 1, right? He was 13 touchdowns in 2019, finishes running back 2. 17 touchdowns in 2020, where he finished as running back 2. Last season, he had 1,100 yards, 1,200 receiving yards, so he had a decrease in rushing yards, he had a decrease in receptions, and he had a decrease in receiving yards on the season. But he did all this in 13 games. So had he played in the extra, let's say 3 games, he probably would have finished with somewhere around 1,300 rushing yards and maybe 350 to 400 receiving yards, which is on par with what he did in 2020. The major difference for Dalvin Cook is the 6 touchdowns as opposed to having 13 or 17. So there was a decrease in the touchdown percentage that he had. Now, I don't like to throw positive regression out there and say that, based on no information, he's just going to score more touchdowns. But there were times last year where he was in the red area and he was hurt for a lot of the season too, but he was getting a lot of red zone touches. He had 47 red zone touches and 7 goal line touches, which was number 9 among running backs. And he didn't convert those opportunities very often. And what you want to see is obviously him have those same numbers where he's top 10 in red zone touches at the running back position, but converting them into touchdowns. Because if you give him, 13 touchdowns like he had last year, he finishes as the QB, as the running back 5 or 4. So I think his consistency is there. He's been very, very good for pretty much his entire career for the most part. He has the same concerns for me now. He's 27 years old, so he is getting a little bit on the older side. And last year he had a labrum tear and a shoulder dislocation, which he's had time to recover from. He also had an ankle sprain earlier in the season that he suffered in week 2. So I think, I don't think there's any major injuries, not super severe over the last couple years. So I'm not super concerned about injury history. I would just handcuff Alexander Mattison to him if you can, but I think the major difference was the touchdowns, and I think you could see some positive regression in that category where he does get up to 10, 12, 13, 14 touchdowns next year and gets himself back into that top 3, top 4 conversation. But I have him number 3 right now. Number 4 on my rankings is Austin Eckler, and right now that's a major difference. Austin Eckler is ranked number 3 among people, and I might actually swap that. But Eckler is an interesting guy, and he's provided a really good upside for a lot of people the last couple years. He's been a top 10 quarterback since 2019. He was running back 6 in 2019, running back 9 in 2020, and then running back 2 in fantasy points per game in PPR. So he was really good. Last year he's number 2. He played in 16 games in 2019, 16 games in 2020, and only 10 in 2020. In 2021, he played 16 games and only 10 in 2020. So his big thing is, last year was the first time in his career that he had rushing opportunity, over 200 attempts. And I don't, the way Eckler is built, 5'9", 199 pounds, I don't know that he can sustain a 250 touch rush attempt workload. But I think what he does provide is a high ceiling when it comes to, passing work. So he gets 70 receptions last year, 647 yards. He had 20 total touchdowns. The reason why I don't have him ahead of Dalvin Cook is because I see he just had those 20 touchdowns. He had 70 receptions. He had 1,500 rushing yards. 1,500 total all-purpose yards, which is great, awesome. But he's always been in the conversation or the vicinity of, running back 6 to running back 9. And the difference this year between other years is obviously his rush attempt share, which I don't think is going to change. So I think he's still going to get that. But the other area was the 20 touchdowns that he had. And I don't know that, Austin Eckler can reach that 20 touchdown threshold. He's also 27 years old. So he's getting older as well. He's been in the league for 5 years now. So when you look at Austin Eckler, I have a feeling that he's going to regress. He might not regress in rushing attempts, rushing yards, receiving yards, or receptions. I think he'll be fine in those categories, but he's going to see a total touchdown regression on the season that is going to be felt, which would drop him into like the 6 or 7 conversation, and I have him number 4 right now. So I like him. I like his pass catching work. Obviously in PPR leagues, it's wonderful to have that. And if they do pass the ball a lot and Eckler gets, over 70, 80, 90 receptions, that gives him a good base floor to kind of recover from. But I don't think he's going to score 20 touchdowns again. So that's why I don't have, Austin Eckler ahead of Dalvin Cook at this point, which might be stupid. I don't know, but I'll go with it. Number 5 is Najee Harris. We talked about Harris in the past. He's got a lot of opportunity that he can work with. He almost had 400 rushing attempts last year. I'm gonna pull that up just to confirm, because every time I say he almost has it, he did get it. But last year he had 307 rushing attempts, 94 targets, with 74 receptions. So he had just under 400 opportunities on the season. Now he wasn't really efficient with those opportunities, only getting a total, fantasy point per opportunity of, I think it was 0.7. I'm trying to find the number now. Fantasy point per opportunity, which is 0.75. So that's around the numbers that you saw from Le'Veon Bell. So he gets a lot of work, but he doesn't get a lot of fantasy points that relate to that work. If he was around 1 fantasy point per opportunity, I think he'd be in the conversation of RB1 because of the sheer opportunity that he gets. I don't know if Pittsburgh's either going to be more efficient offensively this year because of the change in quarterback, or if they're going to be less efficient. We'll have to see what happens with Kenny Pickett. We'll have to see what happens with some of these other quarterbacks that they brought in. I don't know who's going to start at quarterback for this team. I would suggest they go with Kenny Pickett, but Mitch Trubisky might be somebody that they go with. Either way, some people believe that Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett would be better for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, but I think there's a lot of questions surrounding that. Last year he finished as the RB3. He's the RB9. He's the 9th player off the board in underdog drafts. So I love Najee Harris. I think he's a great selection. You know the opportunity that you're going to get on a week-to-week basis, so you don't have to worry about that. It really is up to Najee Harris to produce, and if he produces, he's a top 5 running back. So I like him at number 5. Number 6. This is a little bit of a shocker because the expert consensus has Derrick Henry 4. I have Derrick Henry 6, 2 spots lower than that. Like I said, don't like to play the injury game. Don't like to play the he's due game. But Derrick Henry's due for something not great with the opportunity that he gets. Last year, he got hurt in 2021. Played in 8 games and then missed a large chunk of time on the season. I've heard rumors, not sure if they're true or not, but rumors that this team wants to limit opportunity. or limit the amount of times this guy touches the ball on a week-to-week basis, so decrease the opportunity share that he had, which was basically 20 opportunities per game. I think it would be more than that, actually. Excuse me. But he had 27 carries a game, and he also put together 18 targets, which was two targets a game last year. No, in the games that he played, 2 targets a game. So they're trying to get him more involved in the passing game, which is good. But he is 28 years old. He has regressed pretty much every season since, well, not really though. He was number 4 in 2019, number 3 in 2020, 24 points a game last year through 8 games played, which would be, top 3 or 4. I still think he's a really good player, but there is concern for me that he is getting older and that injury that he had last year, which was a foot fracture, is going to come back to haunt him. And right now, Tennessee just traded their star wide receiver to draft Treylon Burks, and that's great and all, but the offense got worse. And so things aren't looking great for Derrick Henry. And I think that right now he's getting drafted as the 7th player off the board according to ADP. So we'll have to see where Derrick Henry lands, but I'm not concerned about his production. If he's on the field and he's playing, he's a top 5 running back. My concern, and the reason why he's 6, is because of the injury. He doesn't have an injury a large injury history, but the injury last year, leading into this year, being 28 years old and getting that large workload, I don't know if he can hold up on that. So keep an eye on him in training camp too. If he sustains some kind of hamstring injury, I would just steer clear of drafting Derrick Henry if you can. But yeah, if he plays a full 16, I think he's top 5. And you're getting a great player, but I don't think he's going to play a full 16. So because of that, he is RB6 right now. DeAndre Swift is number 7, and I love Swift. Swift reminds me a lot of Alvin Kamara. And the reason why is because he literally is an elite pass catcher. Doesn't get the rushing workload that you'd like to see on the ground. Last year he had 62 receptions, 151 rush attempts through 13 games played. So he basically had essentially 11 carries per game, basically 11.6 carries per game. Let's say it's 12 carries per game. So that would have put him somewhere in the vicinity or in the conversation of 200 touches or 200 carries. And then he had 78 targets, which he hauled in 62 of them, 4.8 catches per game. So basically 5 catches per game. You look at these numbers and they kind of remind me a little bit of Austin Eckler at the top of the rankings, right? And it's just because he missed a chunk of time here. He missed 4 games on the season. And I don't know if that's something that will consistently happen, but the big thing about Swift is that in that time he had 7, he might have had 10 touchdowns again. I think he would have averaged around 17 or 18 points, fantasy points per game. I think he has that similar upside of an Austin Eckler where he could finish in the top 5. He was top 5 for much of the season last year before the injury. So I like where Swift is going. The only reason why I have him in this conversation of 8 and not, higher than Derrick Henry or higher than some of these other guys is because I like Henry Harris. I like Henry Harris, Eckler, Cook, McCaffrey, and Taylor more. I would take the Titans offense over the Lions offense right now. I wouldn't take Pittsburgh, but Najee gets way more work than DeAndre Swift. I like Eckler's offense. Dalvin Cook's offense is good, and he gets the work. Christian McCaffrey gets the work, and then Jonathan Taylor gets the work, and the offense is going to be good. So it's like you have some of these players right now where, DeAndre Swift out of that group has the worst offense and doesn't get a hell of a lot of workload. So that's why Swift is 7 at this point. But great draft selection if you get him. He does have upside to be a top 5 pick. And let's quickly go through the final, 5 guys? Joe Mixon comes in at 8. And Joe Mixon had a great year last year, but I don't know. He's 25 years old, so he's not that old, but he has played in the NFL for 5 years now. So he was drafted in the NFL when he was 20 years old. This was the second time in his career that he's been an RB1. So he was an RB1 in 2018, and now he's an RB1 in 2021. And so he was top 5 this year, 1,200 rushing yards. I think the efficiency of the offense really doesn't change. He had 292 rush attempts, which is great, 42 catches. He's everything you're looking for in a running back. I don't really have anything super bad to say about him. I just think that his ceiling is capped for what he can do. The only area of regression that I see that he could have is the 16 total touchdowns he had last year. But, I mean, I don't know that he's going to lose the rushing opportunity. I would be a little bit more concerned about, because he has in the past struggled with injury, and it's limited his ability to have success. He also has not been a very, very efficient runner. 4.1 yards per carry last year, 3.6 in 2020, and 4.1 in 2019. So the last 3 seasons he's been good, but he hasn't been efficient on the ground. That might change now. Joe Burrow is, elite, and teams have to look out for him and look out for what he has to do. So I think the only area of regression that you'll see from Joe Mixon is the 16 touchdowns. But if it does happen, it'll be down to like 14 or 13. I think he's got a good offense, a good head on his shoulders, and I think he's got good upside to be a great player. I think he's more of a, like you talk about some of these players, like I just talked about Swift. Swift is a ceiling play, and he does have a low floor. Like if things don't work out for Swift and the Lions suck this year, then that's not good for Swift, and Swift will probably be like 10, 11, 12 instead of 7, 6, 5. Joe Mixon's one of those guys where he's definitely going to be a low-end RB1, but he's going to be that. You know what you're going to get on a week-to-week basis. He'll produce, and if you want safe production late in the first round, early in the second, then Joe Mixon's a great pick. If you're like at pick 12 right now and you take, a wide receiver and then Joe Mixon, I think you're good. If you take 2 running backs and Joe Mixon be the safer one, and then maybe Javonte has a breakout at 13, you could do that as well. But I think for Joe Mixon, he is a safer play. He's not a breakout play. And at the end of the first round, I tend to lean more towards the breakout plays than the safe floor plays. So, but Joe Mixon's really good. He was RB4 last year. I think he'll be fine in the points per game total. He'll probably finish anywhere between 4 and 8 in my projections, and he might come up in my rankings, but I'm not really super sure about that. Number 9 is Nick Chubb. Now, it is extremely likely that Deshaun Watson, because something's got to happen, and I think the outcry that would happen, I'm not providing any opinion into this, but the outcry in the fantasy community and in the regular football community and football world would be existentially loud if he wasn't suspended for a full season. So, or Deshaun Watson wasn't suspended for a full season. So, with that being said, I'm ranking Nick Chubb here at 9, under the assumption that Joe Mixon does not play. I don't think that Joe Mixon. Under the assumption that Deshaun Watson does not play. If he was playing, Nick Chubb would probably be 7 for me, and Swift and Joe Mixon would move down. I love Nick Chubb. I love what he provides. He's got a lot of opportunity. I don't like that he splits with Kareem Hunt a lot of the time. That kind of blows. But Nick Chubb does provide a really good ceiling and a good floor. He's one of those safe players with a good ceiling. And I think he has a really good season. He could ascend into that, top 4, top 3 conversation. And that is how talented he is rushing the ball. And he's a good pass catcher too. Kareem Hunt just takes that pass catching work away from him. So it's like, there's some things holding him back. The fact that Kareem Hunt is there taking his pass catching opportunity, not having Deshaun Watson as your quarterback, is going to be tough. And I think you're safe to say, Nick Chubb will get that production, because if they go with, I think it's Tyrod Taylor, who's the backup right now, if they end up going with him for the season, you're going to see a lot of work going to Nick Chubb. He's going to get a ton of rushing work on the ground. And the only thing I would be concerned about is his efficiency in that, because they know he's going to run it. They're not going to get a lot of red zone opportunities, and Nick Chubb's not going to score a lot of touchdowns without Deshaun Watson starting at quarterback. So I put Nick Chubb 9 because there is a little bit of, a problem there for Nick Chubb. And if he had Deshaun Watson starting, I could see even him being ranked with Najee and Derrick Henry in the consensus ranking. So I think, not having Watson is pushing Nick Chubb down right now. The ECR has him at 9 as well. So, we'll just have to see as what happens, because Nick Chubb will move up if, Watson does end up not getting a suspension and playing this year. But if Watson gets suspended for a full season, Nick Chubb around 9 or 10 is pretty good. Number 10, I have Aaron Jones. I actually think this might be a really good opportunity for Aaron Jones. Now, we know what we're going to get from Aaron Jones, and it's going to be a split between that's just the nature of the Green Bay Packers offense. We're going to have split opportunity between Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. That's just going to happen. But when you look at Aaron Jones and you look at the upside that he has in the past, he's had times where he could finish as a top 3 guy, top 4 guy. But then there's also been opportunities where he hasn't produced at that level and been a low-end RB1. I think he's a safe low-end RB1. He kind of reminds me of like a poor man's Joe Mixon up in this back end. And I think he'll probably end between 10 to 14 if I had to take a guess as to where Aaron Jones finishes next year. But the one good thing that he does have on his side is that there's no more Devontae Adams. And pretty much the only target share in the offense right now is Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. And so I think that when Aaron Jones is on the field, he's going to get his work. He's going to get his rushing attempts. He's going to get his pass catching opportunities. He'll be there to produce. And so I actually think he's a good floor play. I think if you want to get Aaron Jones on your team, he is a really good floor play. Say you drafted more of a breakout guy in the first round. Right now he's picked 17. So say you drafted a more this is one of those things where if you're picking at 3 or 4, you can pick a safe running back in the first round that is going to be like a top 5 guy, and then draft Aaron Jones as your second running back and know you're probably going to get, a low end RB1 out of him. So I think that a lot of people are fading back on Aaron Jones, and I personally am looking at Aaron Jones and going, okay, we know what he is. We know he's in a split backfield. We know his upside probably isn't going to be top 4 or 5, but he's going to get his opportunities. He's going to produce with his opportunities. He'll probably finish between 10 and 12. So if you accept that with Aaron Jones, he's totally worth that late round second pick. Do you want to make 2 safe picks? With your first 2 picks? I don't know. That's up to you. I typically like to go with, like a running back in the first round and then, a breakout in the second. So if you have a high first round pick, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, one of those guys are going to be really good. And then, if they stay on the field and they're healthy, they're going to be good and you're going to be fine. And then the second round, you take a breakout guy like Javonte Williams or, somebody that you can rely on to possibly have a top 5 breakout season. I typically like doing that because you do have the safe production. If that guy doesn't break out like Miles Sanders didn't, or even Antonio Gibson didn't, you still get top 15 production out of that second guy and you don't really fall apart. The safe play is a safe play. You know what I mean? It's taking Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones and, just sticking with that. But I do like Aaron Jones. I think he's a good pick. If you take a risk pick in the first round, I would definitely take Aaron Jones in the second, knowing that, okay, this guy will provide me at least some form of a base floor. But let's talk about number 11 and number 12 to complete the show. Alvin Kamara is number 11 on these rankings. And he's had some stuff floating around regarding legal things, and also I don't know. He's getting older, and he doesn't provide the same like upside as he has in the past. Right now, he's going off the board as number 30. He was RB8 last year with the swapping in and out of the quarterbacks early in the season when Jameis Winston was the quarterback. He wasn't amazing. He actually didn't start playing really, really well until Jameis Winston stopped performing at the quarterback position. He only played 13 games last year, finishes the RB8. Points per game wise, he was number 4. And he's 27. He's in that same conversation. Really interesting that points per game wise, he was number 4. In 2020, he was number 1, and then he was number 8 in 2019. Why he's getting drafted as the 11th or at pick 30, I think that's a steal, to be honest with you. This is one of the great values in drafts right now, because Alvin Kamara, I think the big reason why he's 11 right now is because he has, for me, is that because he has a low floor, and it's like he could just bust the bottom of the floor because the offense has changed, the coaching staff has changed. Jameis Winston may not be a good quarterback, and the offense for this New Orleans Saints team could be not great, and that would be the floor out. Alvin Kamara just completely collapses, isn't good. And then you also have the ceiling of Alvin Kamara where he could finish top 4, in the points per game. And it could go either way with this guy. But if the legal things clear up and things go well for him, I actually would maybe rank him ahead of Aaron Jones and maybe even Nick Chubb, because I think there is a ceiling there for Alvin Kamara to have success. And if he's at pick 30, I mean, you're getting him late second round in 12 team. That's really, really good. So I like Kamara going into this year. It is a little bit more, it's not really a risk pick because you are taking him a little bit later, but I think, there's a low floor when it comes to Alvin Kamara, which is why a lot of people are not like, okay, he did have he's number 4 in PPR and points per game, but we're not really excited about him because he provides these many issues. So I think there's a lot of question marks with Alvin Kamara, and that's what's pushing him down the boards. But the further he goes down, the more of a value he becomes, which is somebody that you should target. But anyway, final guy that we're going to talk about is Javonte Williams. And Javonte Williams on the ECR is 13. I have him 12. And the guy that I swapped out for him is Leonard Fournette, who doesn't look healthy right now. He looks big. And I don't know if that's good thing, bad thing, no idea. But not excited about what I'm seeing from Leonard Fournette. I think drafting Leonard Fournette and putting him in the top 12 in your ranking is a fool's errand, to be honest with you. And we'll have to see what happens with that. But I think there's a lot of question marks surrounding the Bucs and surrounding, Leonard Fournette than there are answers. Javonte is a whole other conversation. Now, I do want to look up really quickly because I believe the Denver Broncos re-signed Melvin Gordon. They did. So he's going to be there. But you have Javonte Williams, who was, he was a guy that a lot of people really liked last year as a late season breakout. Finished RB17. He was 22 in fantasy points per game last year. In the second half of the season, weeks 12 to 18, he had 3 out of his 7 games played were RB1 performances. 4 or 5 of them were RB1 or RB2 performances. So he had some really good games down a stretch. I think they should shift the snap share in favor of Javonte Williams and give him a massive load of opportunity, which I don't know if it's going to happen or not. But he had 203 carries, 53 targets, and 43 catches last year. So he had 246 total opportunities. His fantasy point per opportunity was 0.8, but he was one of the most efficient runners in the game. He was number 6 in evaded tackles, number 8 in juke rate among running backs, number 6 in yards created, number 7 in yards created per touch. So he was very, very, very efficient in pretty much every category in terms of, creating yardage for himself. He had 5 yards per touch, which is number 18. He's a really, really good player. And I think efficiency-wise, he showed that last year. He showed he could be one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL. He's number 9 in catch rate. Like, he does a lot of things really, really well. And the big thing about Javonte is that he is, spoiler alert, one of our breakout running backs, or at least going to be one of our breakout running backs for this season. The offense now has, it now has Russell Wilson, so it's going to be a lot more efficient. Javonte Williams is going to come in that efficient offense and run the leather off the ball. And I think he'll score anywhere between 14 and 16 touchdowns, 1,400 rushing yards, and 500 receiving yards with 40 to 50 catches on the season. So I think there's a really good chance that Javonte Williams breaks out this year, ends up a top 5 running back, and I will take him as a breakout player. But I'm ranking him 12 right now because I think, the rest of these running backs are safer. I love Javonte Williams in the second round, though. If you can smash that, get it all day. Right now, his ADP is pick 26, so he's even falling into the third round in ADP for underdog drafts. And I like where it's going for Javonte Williams. The major question is, do they continue to go with the split that they've had with Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams, or do they shift to more of like a 60-40 with Javonte Williams getting the 60 and Melvin Gordon getting the 40? I don't know, because Melvin Gordon, like I said, he's on the back 9 of his career, and he's old, so he can't take the workload that they gave him last year. And I think that they want Javonte to be this guy. It could stick 50-50, which would suck. But we've seen guys like Aaron Jones go 50-50 with another running back and be really, really efficient and really good. But I think even if he doesn't get what you want to see out of, like, in 17 games, he had 203 rush attempts, 43 yards. So if he gets 300 opportunities this year, I think he'll be really good. He stepped up his game, and all bets are off if a guy like Melvin Gordon gets hurt, right? So I love Javonte Williams as a breakout this year. He's one of my favorite breakouts, the number one breakout that I have, and he'll be really good. That's why I have him 12, and I might even move him up possibly ahead of some guys, but I think he's good. I don't know why the ECR has him at 13, or even the underdog ADP having him at 26. I could totally snag this guy in the third round if I wanted to. If you wanted to take that risk, I'll probably take him in the second if there's that opportunity there for me. But I love Javonte Williams this year. So there are your top 12 running backs for the 2020 fantasy football season. Jonathan Taylor, McCaffrey, Cook, Eckler, Harris, Henry Swift, Mixon, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones, Kamara, and Javonte Williams. Those are my 12. We got some good stuff coming next week, including a mock draft, and Rick is back, so be sure to check it out and listen. Thanks for listening, guys. See you later.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.